We are with Dr. Jacqueline Battalora. Her book is Birth of a White Nation, The Invention of White People and Its Relevance Today. She traced back all the way to the 1600s when they first instituted whiteness into the law. And here we are, more than 500 years, almost 500 years later, still debating this thing. Thank you for doing the book. So where are we now? And just personally, I'm going to ask, you didn't end up marrying Ricky, right? I'm imagining you went the traditional route.
I went off to college and he went off and started his businesses in Austin, and we're still the best of friends.
Okay. But yeah. Do you live a relatively homogenous life now? Because I feel like there's a lot of folk out there crusading, but it's quite another thing to,
Yeah. Well, you know what? I mean, for my white world, no, it's not homogenous. Both of my neighbors on both sides of me are African-American. I'm at a school, I work at a university that's predominantly Latinx. So could it be more diverse? Sure.
This is not an indictment. There was a study, 3/4 of people who identify as white self-segregate in this country.
Oh, yeah.
And they willfully put themselves, so your grandparents, if you have no relationship to people, and we've talked with Tim Wise and Jane Elliott and Robin DiAngelo has been on the show about the willful way in which whiteness maintains itself. And now these laws forcing white people to have babies because there's a dwindling effect, because it's a made up construct, and you're going to lose your population at some point, because it's just, when people start to wake up to it, it's a paper balloon. So how do we navigate where we are right now?
Yeah, well, I think, I'll speak to white people primarily right now, if that's okay. Yes. What we need to do, first of all, there's no place not to begin to engage in this effort of racial justice. We have work to do inside of ourselves. We have work to do in our families, in our communities, in our schools, in our workplaces, in our politics. There is no place there is not a tremendous amount of work to be done. And so people always ask me, well, what do I do? We white people, we like give me 10 things to check off my list, please. And so for me, the most influential route for my growth was learning truthful history. And so that was huge for me. So we need to learn some honest history about this country, and especially white people, because we didn't go into homes or to faith communities that offered us truthful versions of history. Most of us just went to our public school and got that version. And so much of it is not truthful, or it leaves out so much of the truth that it can't be, it lacks a genuineness. So learn truthful history. There are some, if you're not a reader, reading, of course, I think is fabulous. If you're able to engage yourself, there's so many things on CD and available virtually and through all different kinds of resources. So I just think there's no excuse to not engage in learning truthful history. The other thing that we need to do is we need to process. And I know when I was in graduate school and really digging into so much of this history, about the only thing written that I knew of out there in the world was Peggy McIntosh's list of white privileges. Like, that was it. And there were no groups for me to go join and talk about my whiteness and what I'm coming to see for the first time about what it means to be white. But today there are all kinds of support structures to help white people process the history that we all need to learn. There are affinity spaces, virtual and in person. Highly, highly, highly recommend that. If we're just learning all this stuff and not processing it and bringing it literally into our bodies, then it's just going to stay up here. And we will change nothing. I have met so many, especially men, and it's not because men are particularly bad, it's because they're socialized as men, to learn just the intellectual parts of race. But it's more than intellectual. It is it informs our bodies, like how we respond, how we feel in relation to each other.
I don't know how. I'm sorry. I don't know how. There's no benefit to a white man dismantling whiteness. There's zero. There's no pain point for them to not be white. Do you know?
I'm challenging you on that. I'm going to challenge you, Karen.
I can't see somebody waking up. Oh, you know what? Let me give up all of this. It's all this law, this to be able to do all of these things and storm the Capitol and not be held accountable, run for president from jail. Like,
all of those things are true. And I know this from my own self, that whiteness damages our humanity. It diminishes our capacity to have empathy. Think about how we describe psychopaths. What's a definition of a psychopath?
So you're saying the entire white race?
Well, I agree
with you. Hold on. Yeah. Yes, you are correct. But the reason why you know that is that you had a relationship first in sport, which sport is the greatest equalizer and coming together that you can possibly introduce young people to. It's very hard to be racist when you are a teammate of someone, and then you fell in love with somebody, and you probably got to know the family, whatever. And you're like, all of these stereotypes don't. You had a relationship that impacted your life, and I always say, once you go black, you never go back, because there's something about the culture. If you are a white person, you come in the culture, you can't deny it. The problem, though, Dr. Jacqueline, is that 75% of y'all's cousins refuse to have relationships. So they are ostensibly willful sociopaths.
Yeah. And let me also add a little more nuance to that. So even though the first person I experienced falling in love with was this amazing young Black man, I still, even with that, right? And I'm guessing in my psychology, I carved out an exception. He was my Oprah. He was my Colin Powell, right? Whiteness.
You're Barack Obama.
Yeah. Whiteness has said, oh, all the real Black people are that way. And then we have a few exceptions that will sort of fold in. They're okay.
Right. He had to be all of the exceptions. He had to be just handsome and all of the things, right?
Absolutely.
Oh my goodness.
Absolutely. So even with the depths of those relationships, I still had what I like to refer to as been successfully acculturated in the racial hierarchy, and so this is what happened to me that was a significant moment in my life. I was watching news coverage, and it was talking about the 6 people who'd been killed on the Long Island train, 6 white people. And I sat there and I was upset. I was thinking about children who now had a parent who'd never come home, parents who now had a child. Anyway, I was kind of wrecked for the rest of the day. And then like 3 or 4 days later, I came home, sat on the couch, turned on CNN, and on this day, 4 Black people had been killed, and I got up and made dinner. And while I was prepping dinner and I'm an adult, right? I've already been through law school, undergrad, and now I'm in, I love school, graduate school again. And 2 of my closest friends are people of color, African-American woman, Filipino-American man in graduate school. And I realized for the first time in my life that I didn't have empathy. I wasn't thinking about kids who now had a parent not coming home, about parents who now had a child. I did not have anything. And I thought I was a good person. I had done all the things my good Catholic upbringing taught me to do. I was vegetarian, for God's sake, But I had to confront a truth in me, which is that I did not have empathy for those Black people, even with all those relationships. That's the grip that whiteness has on us. And so let me just say one quick thing about how I know that white men too, what's so hard is getting an in with them. It's so hard. With white women, we can talk about patriarchy and their experience and start making some parallels. And
I don't trust them either. Nope. I think it's even harder with Missy Ann than it is with Uncle Fester. But go ahead, continue.
Okay.
I think it's just as hard because you'll empathize over Roe v. Wade, and then 54% of y'all will go vote for Trump. So like it makes no sense. And where pussy hat be
Yeah.
outraged, but then next
Definitely.
election,
Well,
worse.
and when I go to racial justice spaces like the White Privilege Conference that just happened in Mesa, Arizona, a huge percentage of the people who are digging into those really tough conversations, and coming up is the National Conference on Race and Ethnicity in Higher Ed in New Orleans. You will see mostly white women who are going into sessions to learn about race and to come to understand it. So is it true? Did 54% of white women vote for Trump? Yeah. And I don't think any probably of the white women in these spaces voted for Trump. And they're the majority of people in these spaces. So again, I just think it's all really complicated. And
So where
I
did
want
you
to
go?
call us in. I want to listen to Loretta Ross, who's like, we got to stop calling each other out, and call each other in. She's one of the most beautiful human beings out there who keeps seeing how we're like pushing each other away, critiquing each other so that we're shamed and wounded. And I'm like, we have got to find a way to like embrace each other and support each other. Like I still today challenge Ricky on his misogyny. You know, he's a successfully acculturated male in this culture, you know, and it's not okay. That misogyny is not okay.
So after you sat down for dinner, and came to the realization that you too, Dr. Jacqueline Battalora, you have no empathy. Where did you go get empathy? What was the next thing you did?
Yeah. Well, the next thing I did was I began to pay attention to when I did have empathy, and I found out I had boatloads for kittens and puppies and polar bears and turtles and etc. So I began to study myself and my culture around me. And it was not too far after that moment when I stumbled upon white people were there and then they weren't there. Learning that history was my understanding of what the hell happened to me. What could do that to me? I knew from the moment of that recognition that I didn't have empathy, that I was not born that way. I knew that something had been done to me. And now I know what it is. Whiteness. Whiteness is what was done to me. I was born into a culture and society organized in a way that gave me message after message after message that white people are to be elevated and people who aren't white to varying degrees are somewhere beneath.
And you're a good Catholic, which to me is an oxymoron. And in the sense that religion has fomented this very notion, probably better than the school system. And as you're talking, we're going back to 1680, the first laws
1681, the first time there's 1681 reference to white.
In addition to codifying whiteness and elevating whiteness, you also demoted blackness to the point where black can never be elevated to white, ever, forever, right? So what you've ostensibly done with this we're going to divide and conquer is you created a group of people who always see themselves above everyone else, and then a group of people fighting for acceptance into a thing, and then a group that can never be accepted. And so what I deal with every day is the fallout of folk who are so traumatized generationally, the epigenetics of having to jump off of curbs and cower yourselves and laugh in a barrel and speak in dulcet tones and not make the power structure nervous. And no, don't, two or more gather, don't do that. And so when I show up like this, it's so foreign that I'm a problem. So I'm challenging everyone to be a problem. I don't want to be the only problem. Everybody be a problem.
Yes.
Everyone buck the system. Everyone show up fully. But first, you got to know what that even looks like, because 400 years you've been muted. So what does it look like to be a self-actualized, free, determined Black person in the world? Because this thing has gone across the seas. You got Black people bleaching their skins. You got Asian people bleaching their skins. You got folk all over the world identifying the epitome of success with whiteness, white maleness, to be exact. to the point where when I'm in business, and I think I do a damn good job, and I should be CEO of a number of companies because I center human beings. If everyone eats, then we're good. That is so antithetical, but that is the community that I come from. Yeah. I feel like there's work on both sides. Yes, white folk, get your lives, get yourselves together, but I don't even care what you do. I need Black folk to walk into their purpose and power and not center whiteness in anything. How do we do that? I shouldn't ask you. I'm asking the Black folk. I'm talking to Black people right now. What is your role in the job that you're in to break the system? How do you challenge the folk? Because it's inherent bias. It's not that they're evil. Some are evil, but it's inherent. And they're evil. They actually feel entitled to their evil. So they don't identify as evil because they go to church. They're good Christians or Jews or wherever, because it doesn't, to me, matter who you pray to. I had to get that off my chest. I don't know. This work is so frustrating. I'm glad you did the book and the work and the study on yourself and all that, but I don't see a way out of it. And I'm glad you must do it. You, Tim Wise, everybody, we need 100,000 more of you to do this. But then stop putting on pussy hats and going out and crying and coming over and, gather your cousins up at Thanksgiving table. And
Karen, I want to say this because it's so frustrating to me, and I'm not sure how you used it, but I know that people out there, we want white people to cry. Like, I should have been freaking crying that day in front of the TV. Crying is not the problem. What's a problem is when I cry when you challenge me on my racism, and that crying becomes a way to deflect and to everybody to take care of me instead of me confront my racism. But crying we need white people to heal ourselves from this damage to our humanity that patriarchy, that white supremacy has inflicted on us, and become fully human again. I know that we can. Look, when you look at some of us who are white people, I'm still white. I still I still enact whiteness in my life, in my relationships. And I've made significant strides despite being white, right? And if in just the amount of time that I've been able to heal so much of the damage to my humanity, like, there is hope. There is, right? You think of Resmaa Menakem and the things that he has done to restore his Black, beautiful self in the world, to free himself from this deep-seated historical ancestral harm. There is hope. There's not enough, and I don't know how to put these things on speed. For me, that's one of the questions. But I do know that some of these messages from Loretta Ross, I've mentioned her a couple times, but to me, she's a really important voice. And because I know that one thing that's working against us is shaming people, and people who are taking a toe, right? They're taking a toe in this racial justice work. And we're like, let me call you out the way you said that, and let me get on you. And
because you're there. Which is why I don't want you to even be the center of the focus. I'm glad that you did this work, but every time somebody calls up, it's like, as a white man, and I say, define that. They stop calling, by the way, because how do you define that? You've identified yourself as a white woman. How do you define that? What does that even mean?